please tell us what's the secret
How much
today.
time do we have for all the secrets?
How many of the emails arrived in the inbox? Which is one of the big questions of email marketing.
Most delivery problems start with data, not with content. They start with your data. People always say, like, don't use words like free, promo, things like that. That's a bit of a fallacy, right? I have hundreds of emails in my inbox that use the word free in the subject line, in the content. Most of them don't have a delivery problem because they said free in the subject line, even if it's in all caps or 10 exclamation marks.
Yep.
So what they found is they were leaving a bunch of money on the table because
Hello and welcome to episode number 8 of the Marketer podcast. Today with us is coming from Canada, Matthew Vernhout, and he is the principal email advisor at Email Industries. Welcome, Matthew. How is life in Canada?
Things are great. The humidity is finally broken, so it's not 50 degrees anymore. Well, 40 degrees, but
40 Celsius.
40 Celsius. Yeah, it was pretty hot here the last 2 weeks, but it's finally let go, and now it's a beautiful summer day.
Cool. Which part of Canada are you in right now?
I'm just in the Toronto area, so Ontario.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. So Matthew, I have a question that has been bothering me for a while now. What do you have to do and to whom to get this badge that you have on LinkedIn which says Top Email Marketing Voice? What do you have to do to get that? I want that.
So in the LinkedIn community answer section, so there's those you can answer those key questions. You have to answer at least 3, I believe it is, and then get a bunch of people to apparently like what you say. And when you do that, they give you a badge. It says top voice in whatever topic that you're in. So you could do a podcast one, you could do a digital marketing one, you could do email. That's just where I ended up, was email.
Nice. So you answer a quiz, but also are people considering your answer valuable or not?
Yeah, there's people that can like, can reply, can ask additional questions. It's just part of I got asked by LinkedIn, said, answer this question for us. And so that's how I started, and I answered a whole bunch, and now apparently I'm a top-in voice for email.
Nice. And I see your t-shirt. I'm not a robot. I like it. And I just read that actually, maybe you can confirm or not this. It doesn't matter how the click itself, like I'm not a robot, but it matters how you move your mouse cursor, because machines go exactly to the checkbox. Humans go around and finally nail it. So this is an indicator that was clicked or was not clicked by a human.
I mean, I'll admit I'm not an expert on CAPTCHA, but it's quite possible that they do look at the mouse movement on screen, especially when there's the multiple window boxes to determine, who's clicking on what, checking out what. I wouldn't doubt it, but there's people a lot smarter than me when it comes to programming that will be able to answer that question better.
Might be, but there are a few people, if any, smarter than you on the topic of email deliverability, which is a word I have challenges pronouncing right, deliverability. Please tell us what's the secret. First, what's the secret or all the secrets? Because it's about secret revealing, of course.
How much time do we have for all the secrets?
Indeed. And how much money do you have to spend?
Yeah, exactly.
I guess it's also effort. But let's start with the technical one, because of course there is this DMARC for a while, for a couple of months, right? Already now, which is really important from Google and Yahoo perspective. Let's deep dive, like really deep dive into this DMARC. We know we have to do it, but why and how? Just share some of your knowledge.
Sure. Well, let's start like way back in time. We'll turn the clock back to early 2000. a technology came out called Sender Policy Framework, SPF.
Okay.
SPF is a technology that allows a domain owner to say the following networks, the following IP addresses are allowed to send mail on behalf of this domain. And it could be your organizational domain, your subdomains for marketing, subdomains for transactional messaging. So basically any domain that's going to send email needs to have an SPF record that says, I send mail from the following locations. That's the first step. Then, we can fast forward a few years, mid 2000s, late 2000s, into DKIM, Domain Keys Identified Mail. That is, again, a domain-based technology using DNS that says, here's a public key, here's a private key. I create a hash with my private key representing elements of the email. So the from address, the sender, the subject line, date stamp, etc. There's a whole bunch of different headers that you choose to sign, as well as a hash for the body and the content of the message. The public key then is used by the receiving side to then validate that token that was created is correct. And that basically says when the mail left point A and showed up at point B, the content of the mail didn't change. So now you have
content. So not a validation of the standard, but the content, it's the original one.
Yeah, so the point of DKIM is to validate that the content is the same as when it left. So this is important because back in the day, there was a lot of times that people would take legitimate content, modify it, and then replay it further out with fake links and bad malware attached to it and such. So the idea is DKIM validates the message is the same as when it left.
And now,
and then you layer on DMARC, right? So DMARC works in parallel with both SPF and DKIM. So what it looks for is, did either SPF or DKIM pass? So it's one or the other. It doesn't have to be both. Just one has to pass, and preferably DKIM passes. That's because DKIM is going to be on the domain that the user sees in their inbox, right? So what we want is DKIM to align with DMARC preferably, but SPF as well. And what that allows a domain owner to do that says when authentication fails, so both SPF and DKIM fail, take an action on the mail. And there's sort of three current options. Do nothing, so just treat it like you normally would.
Okay.
Put the mail in the quarantine folder or spam folder, because likely I didn't send it, meaning someone's trying to spoof my domain or utilize my domain in a way I don't want them to, or reject the mail. So those are the three options. And basically you can say if it doesn't pass authentication, just don't accept it because it's very likely to be bad mail.
So there is also the option that Gmail, for example, rejects the email.
Yeah. Any of the mailbox providers checking DMARC, if you tell them to, with a policy of reject, should hopefully honor your request to reject it.
Yes.
They can override it. They can override your policy as well and say, well, we think it could be legitimate because maybe it was forwarded through this other network and something broke. So they might put it in the spam folder based on other signals that they have. But the basic idea is, as a domain owner, I can say, when my authentication fails, don't accept the mail.
Okay, which is very, very, very important indeed. Now, let's discuss a little bit, and hopefully we don't lose our listeners with this so much technical.
I'll try to be way less technical in the future.
Let's discuss a little bit about how this works. For example, our email marketing platform, theMarketer, we do the sending on behalf of our customers, and we would like to know from. We have a lot of email addresses, Gmail and Yahoo. I don't know how it's there with you, but for us, it's maybe 40% Gmail, 40% Yahoo, and 20% everybody else, at least in this part of Europe. And we would like to know how many of the emails arrived in the inbox, which is one of the big questions of email marketing.
Absolutely.
And maybe even more granular, which arrived in inbox, which is like not arrived in spam, and which of them arrive to inbox and which arrive to promotions. Can you like build on that?
Yeah, so there's no way to know that for every individual. First off, right? At best, looking at a few different things. One, you can use a seedless technology that will give you a bellwether of, in most cases, where do we expect the mail to land? Is it going to land in the inbox? Is it going to land in the primary tab, the spam folder?
Let's sorry for interrupting. Explain a little bit the seed list. So it's basically 1,000 email addresses, or how many?
Yeah, it depends on the vendor that you're participating with. So it
Yeah.
could be anywhere from 300 to 1,000 addresses across a large number of domains. And it really depends on how you want to configure it, right? Some mailboxes or some email marketers, like in your case, maybe you're saying, predominantly we're going to send to the European market. So you care about Yahoo, Gmail, and Hotmail, but you don't care so much about, Comcast and Rogers and SaskTel, right? Because they're North America based. So you could tailor a seed list to the European market, just like you could tailor a seed list to the North American market. So depending on which vendor you're working with, and there are a number of vendors that you can work with, you'll tailor a seed list to basically your audience. And then they will say, here's 500 addresses, send this test to these 500 addresses. They will then sort of collect the mail from the inbox and tell you what happened to it as a proxy for what's happening in your list.
Okay, but this is only a measure of does it go to spam or not, right? It doesn't take into account the behavior of that individual that might have clicked previously on an email link.
Right. Yeah. And that's why it's a proxy. It's like, which way is the wind blowing today? Lick your finger, put your hand up, see which direction the wind's blowing in. It allows you, though, to have a general sense of how your mail should behave when you're sending it to your audience. Now, individuals in the past that have reported your mail as junk or, blocked the sender, things like that, it's not going to tell you that. Where you're going to see stuff like that is in your own metrics. So you want to look at open rates by domain. You want to look at click-through rates by domain. You want to look at potentially purchases or completion of cart, product, download, whatever it happens to be, if you can, by domain. Because what you'll start to see is domains should perform sort of on a bit of a rolling curve, right? Because not every campaign's a winner. Not every campaign gets 30% open rates and 10% click-through rates, but they should be within a margin of error. Like they should be relatively stable. When you see big deviations, or you see, Gmail performing at 30% opens and 10% clicks, but Hotmail performing at 5% opens and 1% clicks, you can then predict that you're having issues at Hotmail.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the technical component, let's say, of deliverability. How about the content of the email component? How does this affect deliverability?
Yeah, absolutely. Content can impact delivery. Reputation is going to be your first hurdle. So having a good domain reputation, good sender reputation is going to trump a lot of things when it comes to content. People always say, like, don't use words like free, don't use words like promo, things like that. That's a bit of a fallacy, right? Those words don't typically cause problems, right? I have hundreds of emails in my inbox that use the word free shipping, buy one, get one free, in the subject line, in the content. So keywords and subject line tend to cause problems when your reputation is not as high as it could be. So if you have a very high reputation, you could get away with a lot more things when it comes to deliverability because consumers want your mail. So retail that uses like buy one, get one free, most of them don't have a problem. Yeah, most of them don't have a delivery problem because they said free in the subject line, even if it's in all caps or 10 exclamation marks. Where you have a problem is when you have a medium or lower reputation, then you have to pay a bit more attention to your content because it does play more into where does the mail deliver. So, reputation, and I will go back and forth on this in regards to like people asking like, what do I need to do? Like, I'm always going to say fix your reputation first, right?
Okay.
So domain reputation being as high as possible is always the one thing that I'm going to focus on. A lot of times that goes back and do like, tell me about your data, right? Most delivery problems start with data, not with content. They start with your data.
What do you mean data?
So where do you get your list from? How frequently do you, clean your list? How frequently are you engaging your consumers? It comes down to, are you over mailing? Are you not mailing enough? There's a balance to all of these things in regards to understanding positive consumer engagement. And almost all of that goes back to data.
Let's yes, please.
No, go ahead, please.
Let's talk a little bit about something that we must do or we should do when we first start sending to a list. That is list warming up or subscriber warming up.
Yep.
How would you recommend to do that, and when would you recommend to do that?
So warm up can happen a few different times, and I warm up can even be part of a rebuild of reputation. So if you're launching a new property, a new domain, getting new subscribers, absolutely warm up when it comes to a very slow, gradual growth of volume. When you're migrating platforms, changing IP addresses, changing domains, all of those points in an email program would require additional warm up. So that could even be, say you're using one ESP and you have a dedicated IP, but now your volume is big enough, you maybe need a second dedicated IP. So when you turn on that second dedicated IP, you don't just transfer 50% of the volume to it because it won't have a reputation. You need to move the volume over, 2, 3, 4, 5% at a time until you balance at 50%.
Okay, so gradually moving your list to the new domain or IP or property. That would be one of the first recommendations.
Absolutely, that's one of the first recommendations for when you're doing warm up. Another time you may want to look at warm up is if you have reputation you need to repair. So if you've a good example is, say a company suffers from a data breach and they have to reach out to people that have previously unsubscribed, or they have to reach out to people they haven't emailed in 4 or 5 years because their data was part of a data breach. That can cause a huge impact to reputation in a very negative way, because nobody likes to be part of a data breach. Nobody wants to receive the notification. You're going to get a lot of complaints, bounces, and maybe even spam trap deliveries that you're sending mail to. That can really impact the score of your reputation. After that, you may need to take some time to rebuild it. And in a case like that, I would say dial back your volume significantly, focus on your core engaged user base, your VIP list, if you will, and then gradually grow that back out to your normal daily volume again. Because what that's going to do is it's going to allow the systems, the machine learning and the AIs that the mailbox providers are using, to get a ton of positive engagement and help push your reputation back up.
Indeed. Can you briefly explain spam trap for our listeners?
Sure. So there's sort of 3 classifications, if you will, that most people look at for spam traps. And the sort of overall picture of what a spam trap is it's an email address that has no user behind it. So it's owned potentially by a system, could be by a block list, could be by antivirus network, something that is looking and doing research into bad activity on the internet. So they all vary. Some look at, is it just unsolicited email? Some look, are you sending malware? Are you sending phishing? Those types of things. So they do tend to have different focus. But the general sort of classifications are a recycled spam trap. So this is a trap that could have been a valid domain several years ago, call it greater than 12 months ago, that has expired and been purchased by somebody new and is now being used to see who is not following best practices, meaning you didn't clean out bounces, you didn't clean out people who were inactive. And so these are addresses that could have existed at one point and don't exist anymore. That's where list hygiene becomes very important. Typo addresses, so these are your Gmails, your your Yahoos with extra O's or extra H's, right? So these are typo addresses that are common that people miskeystroke either on purpose or by mistake. Clearly, again, they're not going to the intended recipient because so you're misdirecting potentially to a different recipient. And then your last one would be what sort of is considered to be a pristine trap. And a pristine trap would be an address that has never existed for human use. It could have been something that was placed on a website and somebody harvested it. It could be something that someone guessed, or a domain that's never been registered for any other purpose except for collecting information and spam samples. Each of them has a slightly different solution to fixing. But in the end, I said it earlier, I go back to data, right? If you have a large number of any of those, it's a data issue and you need to focus on fixing your data.
But for example, I could use a spam trap inserted by one normal e-commerce customer sending to their subscriber list in order to track if the list was stolen or not, right?
Sure, absolutely, and there's a lot of people that do that. I for example, when I work with customers, and even when I register for brands, everyone gets a unique email address. So I know that if the unique email address I gave to brand A starts getting mail from brand B, the only place brand B could have got that email is from brand A, or through a data breach or something like that. And that's probably the biggest source of spam that I get as an individual is email addresses that have leaked through data breach. And now, because I can track where I originally gave it to, I know who's been breached. I know which messages now are I should be more suspicious of.
Indeed. Could you share a little bit of your knowledge regarding deliverability versus soft and hard bounce of your list? Is
Sure.
there a connection there?
Yeah, again, I go back to data. Data is always right. So, but things to remember. So, hard bounces, it's an industry term, and the actual definition of it is it's a permanent failure, and that could mean any. It could mean basically at this point the message as it is won't deliver. Right. Notice how I didn't say the address is bad. I said the message as it is won't deliver. That could be
there's a nuance there.
right. That could be your IPs listed on the block list, your domains listed on the block list, meaning this message won't deliver until those things are resolved. It could be the user doesn't exist, meaning you have a bad address and you should remove it. It could be content in your message. Maybe they think it's phishing, so they're not going to accept it. Basically, it says this message I'm not accepting. Then you have to interpret what the bounce is telling you and say, is it because I'm blocked? Is it because the address is bad? Is it because the content's bad? Etc. Right? That's the difference. Basically says this message won't deliver. A soft fail or a temporary failure on the other side would be something like the mailbox is currently full. So it's not to say the user doesn't exist. It just says I can't deliver it right now. And most mail platforms will retry for 12, 24, 48 hours, and some maybe as long as 5 days. It depends on the mail platform and who's configured it. So those will retry during that period. And if the person logs in their mailbox and deletes some mail, it will then deliver afterwards. Because it's a temporary issue.
I have many topics to still open up with you, so I'm gonna finish up with deliverability and ask you something that I like from your from what you previously said. That is, email is a two-way communication channel. How come? I'm just blasting, right?
Well, think about how you use email on a day-to-day, right? You're replying to someone who sent you a message, you're communicating with them, and it really does become a channel that consumers are used to replying to. So a good example of why I use this as a sort of a teaching moment for a lot of people. So I have a friend, he used to run the e-commerce for a travel company here in Canada. They used to send email from no reply, right? They sent a whole bunch of email from no reply because it was like, here's your tickets, here's your itinerary. They're system messages is sort of how they looked at them. And one day someone was like, well, what are people actually saying? Like, do people actually reply to us? And so they changed their reply address to a customer support address and sent a bunch of campaigns. Well, what they found was there is a large percentage of their user base that have questions about their travel. I want to know about who my guide is. I want to know about who.
Legitimate questions.
Legitimate questions. I want to add on additional services to my trip. I need to change
There's
the
opportunities.
dates, right? And actually, what they found was if they spent, their team, I think he said he had 4 or 5 people on their team, so each would take, like, Monday I would look at the mailbox, Tuesday somebody else would look at it, etc. Right? So it wasn't just one person responsible, and they would find all the replies and send them to their customer support team. They were able to actually generate significantly more revenue based on those replies and have much higher customer satisfaction because of those replies. And in the travel industry, you're already looking at relatively thin margins. But if you can grow a margin by 10 or 15% on each customer engagement because they're replying and asking questions about a high ticket value purchase,
that's a lot of money.
Like, you can actually impact the bottom line.
Yep.
So what they found is they were leaving a bunch of money on the table because they weren't engaging with customers that were replying. Now, is that going to work for everybody? No. Is it going to work in some cases? Absolutely. And I think you can build a lot of rules to get rid of out of office replies and sort of those sort of garbage type replies that most people need to look at. But you're going to find your customers want to reply to you. They want to ask questions, and not having a process means you're leaving money on the table.
So it's a two-way channel indeed, even if it's just, I would say, a newsletter or an automate email.
Yeah.
We have a couple of minutes left, and I want to touch a little bit on the email segmentation topic. And the first question is as straightforward as it can be. What's your preferred segmentation for a e-commerce brand? Let's take e-commerce brands because it's easier. Is it, I don't know, gender-based? Is it purchase value-based? Is it, I don't know. Tell me.
I think sort of if you look at it, and let's start, you're not doing it at all. You're an e-commerce company, you sell clothing, you're not doing any type of
the whole list.
You're not doing any type of segmentation, right? At a minimum, think about gender segmentation. That's an easy one for people to start with. But don't go like, it's not a black and white, right? It's not like only send men's clothing, because I have a wife. I shop for her from time to time, right? She has birthdays, yes. There's Christmas, there's other holidays and stuff. So adjust your messaging for the individual, but also be aware that not to exclude all of the messaging to that individual. So start simple, gender-based, location-based maybe, right? So you maybe want to send to a Canadian subscriber Canadian prices to your Canadian store, for an American subscriber American prices to their American locations. So, those are 2 very simple ones to start with. Then you can get, layer on top of that, like, do they ever click on children's clothing? Okay, well, maybe now I need to mix in some children's clothing for those people, but not these people. Then you can get into, last purchase, average cart value, type conversations, and especially if you have a consumable product. This is the one I always love. You have a consumable product, right? You're selling shampoo, right? The average bottle of shampoo in a household takes 30 days to be used. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, on day 27, you should be sending me a replenishment campaign that is targeted specifically to say, you're almost out of shampoo, or you're likely almost out of shampoo. Come back and buy more. Those types of return, especially on a consumable product, that's a huge segment that people often forget. And it could be because they don't know average lifespan of their product. Maybe they've never measured it. Consumers are finicky. If I forget that I bought it from you, I might go buy it from your competitor, right? Especially if it's a consumer brand that is in multiple retail locations. Mm-hmm. I might just buy it where it's on sale this week. I don't know. But if you are that shampoo company, maybe you want to send me a coupon that says, our preferred retailer over here, go shop with them. Here's 50 cents off if you buy it.
It totally makes sense. So yes, please.
Sorry, but I would always say, if you're not segmenting, start small and iterate.
Yep. My last question is mixing the 2 things together, deliverability with segmentation. does it make sense for an e-commerce store to use people's names in the subject line? Because we know this increases open rate. But also from deliverability point of view, in the sense that not all the subject lines will be exactly the same.
Mhm.
And also the same question for content. Does it make sense for me to send personalized product in each email based on previous purchases, like shampoo? Does it also help with deliverability?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's the idea of personalized recommendations, but you also have to balance it with over personalized. Nobody wants to be thinking that your messaging is creepy because it's too on the nose, right? It's too much like, how do you know my shampoo is expiring, right?
Yeah.
So, you have to be subtle about it, but absolutely, you know, it's very cliche, but we've always said right message, right time, right? You can do basically one-to-one personalization if you have a huge data warehouse and all types of loyalty data and you understand all the sort of metrics. But at the same time, that allows you to get really creepy with some of your data, and you can actually over personalize messages to people.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find that balance of when you're messaging, what you're messaging, and how personalized to be. First name personalization, that's an easy one, right? I don't even know if I consider that personalization anymore. It's sort of an expectation. If you know my name, you should call me by my name. It's the same way I would expect for an individual I was talking to. If they know my name, they should say, "Hey, Matt, how's it going?" Right?
Indeed, but it can become cheesy to a point to say, okay, okay, you know my name, so what?
Right, and that's why, like, I don't know if I really classify first name personalization anymore as a strategy. It's a thing that people just should potentially naturally do, but again, don't overdo it. If you're sending me a personalized message, Matt, here's your personalized coupons this week, that makes sense. If it's here's the coupons for everybody this week, you don't need to personalize that. So it's a balance. And like all things marketing, too much of one thing is never good, but too little of the same thing. So you have to find that balance of what messages do I personalize by first name and which ones don't I personalize.
Yeah.
And a good example might be, here's your weekly flyer. Don't bother personalizing that. Here's your loyalty point statement, Matt.
Yeah.
Personalize that one, right?
Indeed.
And know the difference between when to personalize and when to just sort of say, this is a generic, it's going to everyone. This is personalized because we chose these products specifically for you based on your past interactions.
Yeah. So key takeaways like moderation in everything, including moderation. Matt, thank you very much for sharing all this knowledge with us. Could you please share with our audience where can they reach you? How can they reach you?
Yeah, so basically everywhere, my social handle, my website is email karma. So emailkarma.net is my website. On X, Blue Sky, basically everywhere you can find me as email karma. You can also check out emailindustries.com, which is where I work. We are a email deliverability consulting company. So if you have delivery issues and you're having challenges getting mail delivered to the inbox, look us up, give us a call. We're here to help. And it's we have several very happy customers that have moved from low reputation into a high reputation to get their mail delivered. So that's our
Thank you very much. Thank you very
Thanks
much
very much for having me.
all the best to you.
Thank
Enjoy.
you.
Bye bye.